everybody, welcome to the Fired Up with CJ show. Today we have one of my all-time favorite guests, Paul Selig, and he's talking about his book Alchemy, which is part two of a trilogy, Beyond the Known. So welcome, Paul.
Thanks, CJ. Nice to see you.
You look like you're in heaven. You have all these like sunbeams.
I'm seeing it. I know the sun just came out. I'm in Maui on a little patio in the middle of jungle, so
Yes.
I can try to angle myself
No,
out.
no, it's great. I love how your guides are just giving you kind of a heavenly appearance.
They're, they're intentionally obscuring me. That's what they're doing.
Okay, so for folks who are not familiar with Paul, he is graciously channels his guides, and his book is a word for word articulation of what his guides tell him. And in his most recent book, I mean, I think it's sort of perfectly timed. When did you write the book? Just out of curiosity.
Well, I don't write the books. The book was dictated in front of groups last spring and early last summer. So from probably March to June was
Okay.
when the dictation was happening. Yeah.
Okay, so a year ago, it was talking
Mhm.
about beyond the known
Yep.
and how we have to move to a higher octave, a higher definition of
Yeah.
self, move from our kind of limited personality, egoic definition of self
Hmm.
to something that was kind of higher to actually a godlike realization of ourself. That's how I
Yeah.
would summarize it.
Hmm.
So, and in the beginning, you talk about I know who I am in the truth, how I serve in the truth. I
Hmm.
know, I know who I am, how I serve, and what I am in
Hmm.
truth.
Yeah.
And it's all God. Like I know who I am, God.
Yeah, it is. That's what they're
I know,
teaching.
I know how I serve. I know how I serve. And who I know who I am, God. I know what I am, God. Now, what is the how I serve? Like, what does it mean to serve as God?
Well, the guides don't use that term serve as God. They talk about the true self or the divine self, which is, they say, the aspect of the creator that seeks to be realized or expressed in form, the truth of who and what you are. So,
Hmm.
who identity, what manifestation. They talk about service as expression. So, how the divine self or true self expresses itself fully is how one serves. So we tend to come from a paradigm where it's thought of as what we do. I'm in a healing profession. I'm doing service on weekends. How one serves is how one is most fully expressed, is what the guides call the true self. And actually, it's an energetic act. It's a vibratory act. But they do say, from this level of expression, how you're called into action will vary depending on who you are and what's required of you. So it's getting away from the idea that it's, I think, a thing done and moving towards the idea of a way of being.
So what kind of a reaching to this higher octave of vibratory quality. It's not something that CJ, I should actually go do radio shows or I should do anything.
No,
It's sort of
it,
like being my true self, whatever
yeah.
that may be.
Yeah, but when you say that, it sounds passive, and I don't think that that's what the guides are teaching. I mean, you may be called forth and do a radio show, but you also just maybe, how you help somebody across the street if you want to talk in practical
Mm.
terms. But that's not really the teaching. They say the true self in expression is operating at a level of vibrational accord that claims what it encounters to it. So they're really talking about, how can I say this? The guides in their books have been using this term that I just thought it was them being, witty in their way. They would talk about being in a chord and they'd say ACCORD or ACHORD as on a piano. And I've been hearing that for 10 years, going, okay,
Mm-hmm.
well, I get it. I didn't get it. But they're saying I didn't get it at all. I was completely, and this has happened a number of times in the books because they continue to unpack the teachings from book to book. And it's like, oh, now I understand what you meant.
Mm.
So the guides say we're operating in an octave. An octave has high and low notes. And the reality that we're seeing before us is this octave in expression, in tone and vibration. So they say there is one note being played in the entire universe, which they can call God or the Word or the first source. But they say that one note is in articulation as all these other things. So if we're operating in an octave, for example, if I'm living in Cincinnati,
Mm-hmm.
and I think Cincinnati is the only place you can live because I haven't had the experience of going elsewhere, what they're doing is in their teachings, moving us to operate at what they call the octave above,
Mm-hmm.
and they call that the upper room. And so the idea of a chord is vibrational accord. How you operate at that level of tone from what they call the upper room claims to it or aligns to all that expresses there. So what you're actually doing is you're shifting or lifting reality to you, if this
Mm-hmm.
teaching is to be believed. And I, at this point, I have to say I do. I mean, been too much evidence and physical evidence around, this idea of resonance and tone. It's palpable.
Mm-hmm.
So I used to think a chord, was, a nice way of saying tone. But what they're really saying is the chord itself are the claims you mentioned earlier. I know who I am in truth. I know what I am in truth. I know how I serve in truth. I am free. I am free. I am free. They say these are all as notes played on a piano. They each have their tone. When
Mm-hmm.
all of those notes are played simultaneously as one thing, it becomes your expression. It becomes a
Oh,
chord of
wow.
vibration. And that's what begins to call things to you, or, you know, transmute or transpose is really the right word, reality. They say any song can be sung in any octave up into infinity, even if you can't hear it or your voice can't reach it. You're still bound by what you think is possible. But
Mm-hmm.
any song can be played in a higher octave, and I can get that much. You understand? So the idea of transposing the music of who we are, the tonation of who we are, to the next level is what this teaching is about. And then they go even farther and they say, that's how the kingdom is claimed, and their definition of the kingdom, they've been teaching this for a long time, is, the realization of the inherent divine in all things,
Mm-hmm.
the source of all things, everything as of that one source, simply operating at different levels of vibration or expression. And the ability to see the kingdom or to claim the kingdom, to have the eyes with which to see it, is their teaching. But by doing that, they say you're actually lifting what you encounter through your own resonant tones. So that's how I serve. You see, that's what they're really
Mm,
getting at.
I see. So if I'm able to like lift myself and hopefully if I'm at that higher octave also vibrating, I'm lifting the collective. That is how I serve. Okay,
Exactly
I
right.
didn't get that either.
Yeah,
Okay, I
yeah.
join you in not getting that initially either.
Hmm.
Okay, so let's actually take this to practice. And I'm
Uh-huh.
going to use myself as I'm using the way that we typically define ourselves.
Uh-huh.
All right, so I'm a 57-year-old Chinese woman, heterosexual, mother, wife who lives in
Hmm.
Seattle, who aligns to not one political party.
Hmm.
Okay,
Yeah.
so my expectations that I've placed upon myself and from being Chinese myself has
Hmm.
been that, women in my generation with my family were, girls were considered not equal to boys.
Hmm.
Girls were supposed to be silent, quiet, submissive, and Chinese people in general, according to my family rules,
Yeah.
were supposed to be respectful. So
Hmm.
those are kind of my whole laden life conditioning.
Yeah.
From Seattle, I moved from the East Coast and from your area, neck of the
Hmm.
woods, like North, New Jersey, New York, to
Hmm.
Seattle, where now I'm supposed to be progressive. I'm not really supposed to, I'm supposed to be passive, not. I'm supposed to be passive, progressive, and never really state truly what I think because I have to be politically correct.
Hmm.
So this is kind of my story laden
Yeah.
down of who I am. So
Hmm.
how do I shift to that to God?
Well, I'm going to probably have to bring in the guides at some point because they
Okay.
do this much better than I do. And I'm
Okay.
going to say that if I end up doing that, I whisper their words and repeat, and it's infuriating to listen to, and I know it, but that's how it comes through. What I would answer, and I'm going to take it on first, that everything that you listed are ways of knowing the self, but they're not who you truly are. They're ways of knowing yourself through your experience, through indoctrination to culture, to family, to the mores of society at any given time. These things are transient. They're ways of knowing the self. So I can say, I'm a 58-year-old man, living in New York, but right now I'm living in Maui.
Mhm.
So suddenly that piece of the equation goes away.
Mhm.
I used to be married, now I'm not. That's another way of knowing the self that is
Mhm.
transient. So I understand that everything that you listed are ways of knowing the self. And the guides say the small self, which they don't denigrate, knows itself through history. It
Mhm.
knows itself through what it has been instructed in. It really doesn't have any new ideas, because its job is to perpetuate the known, my idea of who I am in consort with everybody else.
Mhm.
Now, the guides often say, the small self thinks, the true self knows. And the
Mhm.
guides say knowing is actually realization. So your realization of who you are as a divine being, in some case, I'm going to use the word trumps the smaller ways of knowing the self. It doesn't disregard them. It doesn't mean that suddenly you're 20 years old, but it does mean you'll begin to know yourself as eternal. And you
Mhm.
understand that the age on the calendar is the age on the calendar. You understand yourself and your gender or your ethnicity, and these are ways to learn and ways that you express which are valuable and important, but they are not the truth of who you are. You see, everything
Mhm.
listed is frankly a limited way of knowing the self. It doesn't make them wrong at all. It actually, I understand that those aspects of self are actually assumed by or incorporated in this transposition that they're talking about. So how Paul knows himself in this lifetime is X, Y, and Z. There's a ways that Paul knows himself through his experience, and all of these experiences were opportunities for me to learn and grow and develop.
Mhm.
What the
Mhm.
guides are teaching is that there's an aspect of us that they call the true self that exists, beyond even the agreement to time, that is
Mhm.
present, that seeks its realization through it. So I understand that the divine self knows itself beyond time. It's the eternal self.
Mhm.
But fortunately, it also knows, that, today is Wednesday. So
Mhm.
I can show up for the interview on
Mhm.
time. It
Mhm.
doesn't denigrate that level of reality. It
Mhm.
actually lifts us beyond that. The guides have been
Mhm.
very specific about this. You still need to feed yourselves and take a bath and, put clothes on when it's cold outside. Do you understand?
Mhm.
These are
Mhm.
ways of being in the world that are still valuable, but it's the who that's transposed. The who, it's the sense of identity, which is I know who I am in truth. They're actually sort of repositioning the divine self to the front of the line and not
Mhm.
some theoretical idea. Maybe this will help. There's something that I heard, and I always say I'm 99% sure that I heard it in channel, when I was in my early 30s and I was struggling. And I didn't know what to make of anything anymore. And I often still don't. But in those days, I heard this thing and I heard freedom will come when the throne relinquishes its king.
Mhm.
And I thought, what
Mhm.
the does that mean? What the hell is that? I was pissed. I get it now. I understand the
Mhm.
teaching now. Who sits in the throne? Who's running the show?
Right.
Is
Ego.
it the personality self or the ego, which is
Yeah.
basically how we're taught to operate? And or is it the divine self? And the guides say, the true self, is the one who inherits the kingdom, which is the realization of the divine. So the teachings that have been coming through are all about, frankly, who sits in the throne and how one begins to shift in consciousness or perspective or vibration to acclimate to this other possibility that
Mhm.
they say we've really been operating in opposition to.
Mhm.
The guides often say the only real problem humanity faces, they say, is the denial of the divine, which is here,
Mhm.
which is present.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
everything can be reduced to that. They're very big on saying things like, what you damn damns you back. What
Mhm.
you bless blesses you. A blessing is the realization of the presence of God, or whatever you want to call God,
Mm,
upon a thing or a situation.
mm,
When you damn it, you align in vibration at that level. You're calling to you what you incur. I mean, you're
mhm,
if I what you damns you back up. This is how they put it. You can't be the light and hold another in darkness. It's the
mhm,
easiest teaching of theirs. It's the
mhm,
height of hypocrisy. I am a
mhm.
light worker, and these people over there, whatever.
Right,
We hear this stuff. So you can't
right.
be the light and hold another in darkness, because they say, and it's a healthy teaching. Who you put in darkness, what you put in darkness, calls you to that darkness. It's again
Mm,
just vibrational accord.
mm,
So who sits in the throne? Do I have the Red Queen, off with their heads? Some days I do. Or do I have the true self who knows?
mm,
And the process of, I would say, releasing the baggage that we accrue through the mandates of history, who we think we are, what we've been taught to expect or believe, which positions us as part of this collective, is the process that the gods are teaching, in the book Alchemy. It's
mm,
basically, I look at it sometimes as the elevator ride to the upper room,
mm,
where all of the crap that you've ever accrued is being shown to you, so you can say, I can't hold this any
mm,
longer, you
mm,
know, because it binds us to the low. It's not about making it wrong. The personality structure has a good reason for being. It's nice to know whose
mm,
desk to go sit at when you go to work.
mm,
I think it's useful,
mm,
but it's not the truth of who you truly are. Just like the job you had when you were 18 wasn't who you were, but it felt like it at the time.
mm.
I work at McDonald's. That's my job. It's fine.
Right,
But then,
right.
when you're 21 and you're doing something different,
Mm,
or 40, then that's part of the way that you're expressing and how you're learning.
mm. All right, so this has been fantastic. We've been talking to Paul Selig about his book Alchemy. It's part two of a trilogy, Beyond the Known. And what I want to do in the next segment is now just kind of taking us to kind of a very practical level. We've talked about conceptually where we want to go. I find it hard. Like, I'm like, yes, yes, yes. I will do that, Paul. And then I hang up the phone going, what? What? What?
Yeah,
What am I
no.
supposed to do? What am I going to do? So let's talk about the practical steps to get there. Thank you so much.
Sure.
It means so much to me that you're listening to the show and would love your support in any way by giving me comments below or to subscribe to the show or share the show with friends. Thank you again for your support. Love and blessings.